The United States has a gigantic backlog of munitions going all the way back to the 1970s and 80s. And they're typically held in places like Tonopah, Nevada, in underground bunkers. And those munitions, they go bad, and we literally put them in a giant hole and blow them up. Instead of doing that, we've been giving them to Ukraine for the past few years. We are now starting to run out of those old munitions that we were probably going to have to destroy, and we're getting into the munitions that we would keep in case we get into an actual shooting war. The thing about that is the United States is very unlikely to get into an actual shooting war anytime soon, and we are giving those munitions to Ukraine and to Israel faster than we can make them, and we should be ramping up our ability to make them, and indeed we are. We should also be pressuring Israel and Ukraine into making their own, and we are also doing that, and they are making their own. The Ukrainians have, just in the last couple of months, made more than 5,000 kamikaze drones that they are putting into the battlefield against Russia in a way that will blow your mind. They have the swarm technology that was developed by the Ukrainians in conjunction with some people from the CIA that I know and have made friends with and have talked to on a fairly regular basis. And they can send out 100 or more of these drones at a time in a larger, like, aircraft, unmanned aircraft or manned aircraft. This aircraft flies very high over the battlefield. It's got a cassette in the back of the aircraft that has stacked in it a bunch of these drones with essentially a mortar round, a very, very cheaply produced mortar round that slides into this one-way attack drone. Then each one of these drones is pre-programmed ahead of time for a specific target. The aircraft flies over the battlefield and kicks these drones out the back. The drones then activate once they're in the air, and they spread out and they go and blow up a whole bunch of different, like 100 different targets all at once. It's absolutely amazing. And this is technology that was developed in Ukraine, mostly by Ukrainians, that the United States is definitely making use of, is going to benefit from what the Ukrainians have developed. And if you study war at all, one of the things that you'll notice is that motivation counts for a lot in terms of who wins. Now, just imagine, even though the Ukrainian troops are very tired, they're wiped out, they're worn out, they're demoralized because it feels like this is going to go on forever. They've put their lives on hold for almost 3 years, and they're not seeing a lot of victory in terms of taking back a lot of ground. They are striking the Russians. They are hurting the Russians. They're making it very costly for the Russians. But that doesn't translate into regaining a lot of lost ground for the Ukrainians. And so the Ukrainians are very tired. They're very demoralized because they feel like the world is forgetting about them. But it's still their country.
But when war came to us, everyone understands we need to destroy them, because it's not right when your neighbor break down your door, go to your apartment, stealing your things, raping your wife. It's not right. We must to protect it and defend.
When it comes to gauging the level of motivation, the morale level between the Russians and the Ukrainians morale is still far above that of the Russians. The Ukrainians' motivation to keep fighting is still far above that of the Russians, because the consequences for the Ukrainians if they stop fighting is they lose their country, they get subsumed into Russia, and what happened to Izium, what happened to Irpin and Bucha is going to happen to the rest of Ukraine as well. What happened in Mariupol is going to happen to the rest of Ukraine as well. That means massive deaths, executions, people being tortured and put in prison. Russia has not been kind at all to the Ukraine, parts of Ukraine that they've taken over. Ukraine has a very vested interest in continuing to fight. Meanwhile, the Russians have lost 300,000 casualties, and more than 50% of their total combat effectiveness as a military, their entire military, half of it has been wiped out. It's gone. And because of that, the guys that they're sending into the field, they don't want to be there. They never wanted to be there. They just want to go home. And they're not happy about anything about this war. They don't care whether or not Russia takes over Ukraine. They have no vested interest at all in making Ukraine part of Russia. Ukraine has not lost over 400,000 troops. That's not true. Ukraine has been much more forthcoming with the numbers of losses. They haven't been completely transparent, but they've been much more forthcoming than the Russians have. And there are third-party organizations out there that don't have an interest in either side, that are open source intelligence organizations that have gone back and looked at the number of casualties on both sides by going to cemeteries, by going to looking at photographs and videos that are coming out, things like that. And what they say is that Ukraine has lost somewhere around 125 to 130,000 troops, not 400,000. If you want to count wounded, you could theoretically say that they've lost maybe 250 to 300,000 if you include dead and wounded. But if you do that with Russia, Russia has lost close to 500,000 at that point, as far as dead and wounded goes. And so it's just bad all the way around. Nobody wants this to continue, but Ukraine must keep fighting to try to take back the areas that Russia is still holding in its country.